Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Sarida. This is a reading report about language planning and policies. So, according to Robert Cooper, the definition of that is the deliberate attempts to influence others with respect to their language code. So, the next is the language decision maker. So basically, all of people in this world is a language decision maker, but there are two more level about that. The second level is the teacher and the teacher, writers, and etc. So they are not a language planner, but the decision is based on the language planning in action. So the next is the third level is the linguist itself, the language planner, the people who work in the language planning and policy. So what is the difference between policy and the planning? Policy is basically the rules that govern people to how to use the language, and the planning is basically the plan or the goal of the language that people set. The next is there are three orientation that primary orientation that in the language planning. The first is language as a problem. The second is language as a right, and the third is language as a resource. So in the spaces there are two type of the spaces. The first is the public spaces like a mall or hospital or something, and the second is the personal spaces like home or etc. So the next is a corpus, status, and acquisition planning. So according to Cooper, there are three type of the planning. The first one is corpus planning. Corpus planning is basically the attempt to modify the language code, including the improvement of the technology and stuff. The second is status planning. Status planning is basically an effort to increase or decrease the language status in the given space. And last is acquisition planning. So language acquisition planning is basically an effort to promote the language acquisition of the language. So the next is the keeping the language alive. So in the book, language loss happen estimately 2 times per month, I think, and the big problem of that is from the globalization and the internet. So in that part, there are three terms. The first is vitality. So basically, the language health. The second is maintaining the language. So basically, the how they maintain the language to keep them vital. And the last is revitalization. Revitalization is an attempt or effort to stop or delay the language loss. So in the book, there are degree of language endangerment. So the first is the safe, the second is vulnerable, and the third is definitely endangered. The next is severely endangered, and critically endangered, and the last is extinct. So language planning. The next part is about the access. So the language planning is help improve the language access in the public domain. For example, there are signs in the multilingual signs and the braille signs for blind people. So the next is language language planning and policy in globalization. So there are two important thing in there. In the first is poverty. So what is the relation between language and poverty? So basically, people who in the poverty doesn't have access to bilingual. So and the people who in the poverty, they are careless about the language loss. And the second is the immigrant. So why this is important? Because immigrant a million immigrant happens in this world per years maybe, and those immigrants must know and respect the local languages. So the next is a linguistic landscape. Linguistic landscape is basically all of the sign or poster or any kind of written stuff that exists in the public in order to maintain the vitality of the language. So the next is language planning as uh, language planning as problem solving, I get conflict solving. So some of language planning can solve the conflict, especially in the place where there are multicultural or multilingual. And the last is the roles of linguists in the planning and policy. The first is to develop or evaluate the planning or the policy. The second is to make books to teach people to follow or resist the policies or the planning. And the last is being part of the revitalization project. So that's it for now. My name is Muhammad Sirida. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.